So yes, as introduced, I'm Andrew Ferguson, General Manager. So lot of data today, a lot of specialist information. I've got some numbers on my slides, but they're numbers on my slides rather than numbers in tables. If I've numbered anything, it's probably bullet points. I am the lead on regenerative agriculture at Leckford Estate. As Chris referenced, we had a Waitrose farming conference last week on the estate, and Gabe Brown, regenerative pioneer from North Dakota, was our keynote speaker. And one line, and I've got a few quotes from Gabe that I will remember and draw upon in talks, but one line from Gabe. In terms of the methane problem, the problem isn't the cow, it's the how. So just in context, I'm talking as a farmer here rather than a kind of corporate person, but I'm conscious that every farm is different. And our point of difference at Leckford is that we're the John Lewis Partnership owned farm. We're the only supermarket owned farm, if you like, Waitrose farm in the UK. We have come out with some regen ag commitments as a business. Again, as Chris referenced, our supply base, our UK supply base, will be regen by 2035. We've also come out, albeit a few years ago now, with carbon net zero commitments. So within our UK supply base, farm supply base, will be carbon net zero. It's a collective target rather than an individual target, individual farm target by 2035. And as a business, we've signed up to the Science Based Target Initiative, SBTI, and we're also, I think, we're the first sort of retailer to do so with FLAG, with Forest, Land and Agriculture science-based targets. We launched last week within Waitrose our Farming for Nature programme, which isn't just about carbon, it's about nature, but biodiversity. But in essence, we are supporting our UK farmers and growers in adopting regenerative principles to help achieve our existing carbon net zero 2035 goals and to build resilience within our farm businesses and within the food supply chain. There are various other commitments there on the slide, but the important one in relation to today is that commitment to support our farms on the journey towards carbon net zero. Leckford Estate, I'm privileged here to talk about eFarm. We've talked about farm surveys and what farmers think. I'm just one. This is the farm that I manage. We're 2,800 acres in the Test Valley in Hampshire. The River Test is that little kind of blue line or network through kind of west side of the estate. We produce products for Waitrose, flour, cold pressed rapeseed oil, apple juice, sparkling wine. I was about to say champagne. Dairy, no, it's better than champagne. It's English quality sparkling wine. And they're under the Leckford Estate brand, but we also produce Waitrose branded product. Our beef and our apples go into essential Waitrose product. We also contract farm a neighbour's farm. So I put that in there just to remind myself that I've got to sort of say, we are a commercial farm. We're not a model farm. We're not set up to be a demonstration farm. We are a demonstration farm for leaf, and we're a demonstration farm within our supply chain. But importantly, we're not a model farm. We're not set up to demonstrate anything other than very good commercial practice and innovative practice if we can. We are a farm which kind of treats the environment with as much due respect. Our founder, Speed & Lewis, who purchased Leckford Estate, who founded the John Lewis Partnership, was a keen naturalist back in the 1920s. So we continue in that same vein today at Leckford. So much of our farm is covered by countryside stewardship options and now with SFI options as well. And we've been a leaf demonstration farm for 20 years. We've also been Leaf Mark certified for over 20 years now, one of the first businesses to be Leaf Mark certified. However, more recently, we have been specifically adopting regenerative principles on the farm, the 6 principles there. Anybody who's heard regenerative will know the 6 principles. But the first one there is understanding the context of your farm operation. And then the others there I will run through as we go through this kind of slide pack. I say this is a shallow paddle, and what I'm doing here is kind of presenting my particular jigsaw puzzle. The manure and the methane are parts of that jigsaw puzzle, but I'm kind of presenting the more of the big picture for me. So in terms of regenerative, and what are we doing with regenerative? We're regenerating soil health, we're regenerating biodiversity, we're regenerating the natural resources that farming has degraded over the years. And if one kind of recoils at the fact that we've been degrading our resources and say, no, we've not, the evidence is clear to see. Even on a farm where we have been focused on environmental management, good environmental management for many years, I can see the evidence of environmental degradation. So what have we changed in the last 4 years? I've adopted a 12-year rotation across the farm. There are the 12 courses within the rotation, maximizing diversity by not growing single crop or continuous cropping of wheat or barley. So there's diversity within the rotation. There's also diversity between cash crops with our companion crops, our cover crops, etc. So we start off with a herbal ley, and we've got our 9 years of cash crops. The barley and peas at the end there are for silage or for dry harvest, but they're there to feed our cattle during the winter time. The herbal leys and the cover crops, give us that diversity, give us that soil cover all year round and that living root all year round. We're trying to improve our soil health. We're trying to improve soil biology. So the cover crops, we graze with sheep. They're not our own sheep. We bring these sheep in on tack during the winter time from Wales. And the idea now, we have been grazing sheep on our farm through the winter time for many years now, but the change that we've made is growing diverse cover crops rather than just stubble turnips. So 6, 7 different species. And what we're not doing is grazing everything down to the ground. We're leaving a biomass in the field to feed the soil. And the big change, and it's such an obvious one for me, when we talk about farmers producing food, yes, it's food for humans, it's food for livestock, but increasingly the focus on food for the soil microbiome. So herbal leys, cover crops, livestock, we have cattle at Leckford. Thank you to Chris for supporting ruminants and saying they are critical to the future of a kind of regenerative approach. One of the principles of regenerative farming is to integrate livestock, and that's how we integrate livestock at Leckford, making use of the herbal leys, making use of the barley and peas for arable silage through the winter time, making use of the byproduct from a cold pressed rapeseed operation, the rapeseed cake, which comes out of our presses, is rich in oil, and rapeseed cake has been shown to reduce enteric methane production in cattle. It's not something that our carbon calculators will actually reflect in their output, but there are small things that can happen within a circular system and within a kind of holistic system on a farm that will have benefits to the kind of methane story. I'll not say much about our beef herd. There's just what we've got, but importantly, they're not just grazing our herbal leys, they're not just eating our silage. They are important for biodiversity management on our water meadows, on our chalk grass and other permanent grassland as well. So in support of cattle on our farm, they're regenerating soil health, they're enhancing biodiversity, and of course, the focus of today, they are contributing to our potential future energy independence as a farm. So if I get a look at what we've got there, I'm now struggling to remember why I highlighted those different there we go, there's a mistake. But I'll focus on the right hand side of that slide, which is our cattle are out of grass. chalk grassland, water meadows, herbal lays. The question for me today is, with a change in grazing management, with these increase in soil biology, cowpats. What happens to a cowpat depends on where it lands. It's location, location, location with cowpats. If that cowpat is landing in a biologically rich environment, in a herbal lay which has not been grazed down to the decks, where you've got this microclimate, the dung beetles populating, creating more of an aerobic environment, what is the methane release from a cowpat? And what happens to that in a much more diverse, herbally diverse, and richer soil biology? Because what we're talking about today is capturing methane when the cattle are housed, basically from the slurry and the manure. But what happens to that methane from the cowpats out in the field? I would hate the idea that people see this as an opportunity to keep cows in 12 months of the year. No, what's the other part of the story? So that's my kind of question, from today, really. There we go. There's a site at Leckford. Unique so far, in so much as we are largely farmyard manure based rather than slurry based. So how do you get farmyard manure into a sealed system without, in 2 or 3 years' time, going, we filled our sealed system and we can't get the manure out? It's not being degraded, digested. So we have a setup which allows us to squeeze out the energy-rich fluid from our manure, which then goes into the sealed covered lagoon on the right-hand side. And the details of the kind of numbers, then Chris has kind of presented the numbers behind that. But we should, with the number of cattle that we have on the farm, be able in time to be producing enough, capturing enough fugitive biomethane to power 4 tractors. So, Alistair and his team have pretty much got a customer here for another few tractors. And once we get to that point, we've still got a combine harvester, we've still got telehandlers to power. But we're on our journey to being an energy independent farm. And in relation to the question earlier about the power required to run equipment, we do have solar panels on our grain store, which power certainly during daylight hours. Equipment on the site that you see on the right hand side of that slide. Look, there's no getting away from it. When I do my carbon report at the end of the year, that our cattle are the single biggest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions on the farm. The others, their inputs, fertilizers mainly, we all know this. But cattle are the biggest single contributor. Now, I was a bit concerned, and Chris and I kind of talked about it before, but actually the numbers these are based on, how factually correct are these numbers, these emission kind of factors for cattle? So interesting to see the results and the data from earlier today. But from a perspective of where I am just now, they're the numbers from our carbon calculator. If I factor in what we might save in terms of emissions from our cattle by harvesting the fugitive methane, well, conservatively, I could reduce that. We could reduce that by about 25%. But of course, there are benefits to the other greenhouse gas emissions from fertilizer, from fuels, and from the use of digestate rather than fertilizers, and the impact on nitrous oxide emissions, etc. This is just part of our journey towards carbon net zero. Improving energy efficiency is key, and we've reduced our diesel consumption, our energy consumption by more than 1/3 in recent years by adopting strip till drill and direct drilling. So minimizing soil disturbance, part of the kind of regenerative story, as well as the kind of carbon net zero story. And there we are, last November, direct drilling into a lay. So there's been, after it's 3 years in kind of a lay going into wheat. I'll be honest, at the time we thought there's a window, which is literally a 40-hour window. If we don't get the wheat in, that's it. Should we leave it till the spring? It'll be drier in the spring. might be safer in the spring. I'm glad we got it in the winter. There we go. That's the 11th of August, 2022. You know, winter, but at that point in August 22, I think we did about we recorded 1 millimeter of rain in about 3 months at Leckford. And that's us putting a cover crop in that, you know, a day after we'd taken the straw off the field and going, is that going to come to anything? Oh, sorry. But it did. And within 2 weeks it was raining, and within 2 months after that, we had 50 tons, 50 tons of fresh weight per hectare of cover crop, feeding the soil and feeding a few sheep as well. And there we go. Nothing like the graphics we've seen earlier today. So I prepared this very hurriedly or a couple of years ago, when I tried to convey to my kind of team that we were doing great things, you know. So the 5 times around the world, it was graphical. It landed with the team, and the team wonderfully have kind of bought into everything that we're doing and contributing to everything that we're doing. I'm a farmer. I like producing food, whether it's for humans, livestock, or the soil. And in doing so, I want to improve the soil. I'm not keen on planting the farm down with woodland. I'm very keen on maximising the opportunity that the existing woodland and existing hedgerows present to us. So our aim just now is making sure that the woodland is working from a biodiversity angle, so connecting up woodland. And you can see on the left-hand side, there are little strips of woodland, 25, 30-metre strips of woodland that we put in to connect up habitats. And, you know, based on an MSc project that was run on the estate, that actually works very efficiently in sequestering carbon. That three-dimensional shape that you get with a narrow strip of woodland, you need to be at least 20 metres wide for it to be a woodland, apparently. So that's why we've chosen 25, 30 metres to give us the carbon benefits and the biodiversity benefits. There we go, just a slide to illustrate that. 14% of our farm is covered in woodland, so we're 1% better than the national figure of 13. And it is about improving what we've got rather than planting new. So gapping up, laying hedges rather than necessarily planting more hedges for now. So carbon capture in a woodland and hedgerows. Yes, we're managing that by optimizing what we've got. For me, it's about capturing carbon in the soil, knowing that to get to carbon net zero, it's not about sequestration alone. It's about fundamentally reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, which is why manure and methane are so important to our carbon net zero story. The carbon maps there, we scanned our fields a few years ago, electromagnetic induction scanning, electrical conductivity scanning of our soils, measuring variability, which has allowed us to be more precise when we're testing our soils. It's allowed us to adopt variable rate application of seeds and fertilizer, and there's just an indication of a variable rate seed map, ensuring more consistency with our cropping performance, and more consistent crops, more precisely managed crops, more efficient, reducing our overall greenhouse gas emissions. And bearing in mind, it's not just greenhouse gas emissions per hectare, it's greenhouse gas emissions per unit of product or per unit of food. There's where we are. The last sort of 3 years on the farm, carbon emissions, carbon sequestration. We're better than carbon neutral, but I need to reduce my greenhouse gas emissions by substantially more to be technically carbon net zero on the farm. I think I'm going to stop there. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Has anyone got any questions? Yeah, Amy.
Thanks very much. Hello? That's on.
I could hear you.
Slightly confused about, wonder if you can clarify. Waitrose obviously has a brand, very high animal welfare, just connect right to the supply to create methane to be able to store the manure and so on. So how do you reconcile those two imperatives? Because I can see this trend of people wanting animals to be outside, yet for environmental reasons, sometimes they're going to have to be inside.
So the question of people online is about how do you reconcile the different pressures of more and more people wanting cattle to be outside most of the time, but also now the sort of imperative to have them indoors to be able to capture the methane and turn it into energy. Is that right, Amy? Yeah.
Thank you for referencing animal welfare. It is something that's been priority concern for us within our own business for the last 25 years, and it's something we're proud to lead on as a business. On our own farm at Leckford, the cattle that we have are outside grazing for 7 months of the year. So the fugitive methane that we're capturing is when the animals are indoors, and we bring them indoors for their welfare. We have attempted out wintering cattle on the farm, but we've made a decision that actually housing them during the winter time is the best thing to do. So to make that system or to optimize that system, if you like, it makes sense to be capturing the fugitive methane from the slurry and manure. I'm very conscious that there'll be farms in this country and systems in this country where they can outwinter cattle. And there may be systems where that is the optimum approach for them to take, and I would support them in doing that. But every farm is different, and in looking at our own model, this is what is optimal for us. But I certainly wouldn't be, as the question was going to asked earlier, I wouldn't be using this as an excuse for housing cattle 12 months of the year. No.
Okay, any other questions? Andrew, yeah, over here, Andrew.
Have you consider doing things like mock grazing cows or anything like that? In terms of, some of the regen stuff?
So the question is, has Andrew considered mob grazing? Because that's often used in regen. I'm going to link that up with a question from Bill Grayson online, who's asking about herbal leys. He said the Diverse Swards project at Reading University has shown that using herbal leys reduces cattle methane emissions. So I'm just wondering if you can tie those together. So mob grazing and herbal leys.
Yes, herbal leys, for those of you not familiar, most, I won't call them traditional, but certainly over the last 30, 40 years, most leys used by ruminant livestock have probably been a mixture of 3 or 4, 5 species, but mostly perennial ryegrasses and white clovers. Herbal leys, the ones we're growing are about 20 different species. They could be 40 or 80 different species, but 20 would be a kind of good standard just now. Within 3 functional groups, your grasses, your cocksfoot, timothy, your herbs, plantain, chicory, ribgrass, and legumes, sainfoin, clovers, etc. But the best, most efficient management of that is through, from a regenerative point of view, is mob grazing, which is high intensity, short duration grazing. And we're still in the foothills at Leckford in terms of bringing that into our system. The initial learning was how to get herbal leys established efficiently, effectively. We've kind of done that. We've mastered that. So now and this year we're kind of doing it is moving cat around in the kind of 50 mob of 50, if you like, in the short paddocks. Electric fencing, moving them around. Can't just afford virtual fencing just now. It's quite expensive. But if anybody listening wants to give us a free trial, that's fine. But yet with mob grazing, it's moving them before again they've grazed it down to the board. So leaving trampling the herbage, so that herbage is then kind of incorporated within the soil by the soil biology. And that's exciting back me. And the kind of question is, well, actually, the cow pats that are landing within that short, intense grazing period into this biomass and being pulled into the soil what impact does that have on methane emissions, and on the carbon footprint, let's face it, of our cattle.
And you were using the same going on with chocolate. Is it peculiarly chocolate?
Probably. To be honest, I'm just realising that as much as I grew up on a hill farm in Scotland, most of my farm management career has been on chalk soils. So sandfoin seems such an obvious thing to grow, but you're right.
Yeah. Any more? Oh yeah, Chris, you want a question?
Be gentle, Chris. We're on the carbon calculator. We're better than carbon neutral, but my climate specialist colleagues within the John Lewis Partnership say I've still got a way to go with my greenhouse gas emissions before I.
Firstly, what I was thinking just challenge so I feel what happens. Secondly, do you know about some of the studies I've read show that methane is strong so because have you got any knowledge or understanding of how the regenerative farming minimises the methane emissions from the actual soil itself? I'm guessing it's.
So there's a question for people online about methane emissions from soil itself when it's in a poor condition. And if Andrew knows anything about that.
I don't, but then I can think on my feet here, so I still think on my feet. Regenerative soils, and I'll use another quote from Gabe Brown. What you're looking for, what you're aiming for in soil is a chocolate cake, chocolate sponge. And why? Well, with the brown comes from the humus. And the chocolate cake, the structure comes from that porosity that is generated by a good soil biology. Therefore, porosity, aerobic, which instinctively would say, okay, that is reducing the likelihood of methane emissions from the soil. I think also the fact that keeping the soil covered provides that extra barrier and maybe more biology as well. Instinctively, I think the approach we're taking will reduce the likelihood of methane emissions from the soil. But as ever, the challenge is where are the numbers to prove that? Yeah.
I think we're kind of running out of time. So. Okay, we're running out of time. If I have one more question, someone who's not asked a question who wanted to ask one. Was there someone over here? Oh yeah, okay, we'll make yours the last question. That's all right.
I just want to let you know. What's on the study at the moment, with good work that you're doing, suggesting that the business are negative, whereas your items, to take an example, kilograms of feed, and you're importing carbon emissions, beef would be a different story. You need to reconcile these two messages when facing the public.
So the question is around clarification on the carbon reporting, really, and inputs and outputs. Yeah.
So point of clarification. The carbon balance is for the farm, it's for the whole farming system, it's not for a particular product. And the carbon sequestration on slide that's still on the screen is from woodland, from hedgerow, from soil. And I could say, well, that's from cropping rather than beef. In terms of the reconciliation, it's not that straightforward because a large part of that sequestration will be from the crop rotation, which has herbal leaves and cover crops therein, which to monetize or commercialize, we have livestock. So it would require a little bit of more calculation than I can do in my head at this moment in time to tease out the kind of carbon balance for the cattle, the carbon balance for the crops, and for other enterprises on the farm. But I'll not go any further, because what we've been talking about today helps us on the journey to making sure that ruminant livestock have an acceptable carbon balance. But the important point, as I tried to make in the slide earlier, is the ruminants are also really helpful in enhancing biodiversity and enhancing soil health. Therefore, again, it's a jigsaw puzzle. Within the big picture, the ruminants are important beyond carbon.
Okay, we're going to leave it there, but thank you, Andrew, and thank you all the speakers for this particular session. James, Owen, Chris and Andrew, really vital to kind of understand about the practical kind of realities and barriers and enablers for getting this on farm. So am I handing over to you, Penny? Yep. Okay, so forgive everyone around here.